Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West. Here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. Now, as usual, give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made in first, followed by a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. Then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made in, folks. So let's waste no time. Oh, yeah. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Shootings are still a problem in Youngstown. On June 17th, Ed Runyon has a report that made headlines after Youngstown police probed 2 shootings. Now, it appears that a male who was 18 was killed at the 900 block of Lanterman Avenue early Wednesday. Now, the incident is being called a homicide. Now, the report goes on to explain how several houses had also been struck by gunfire. Now, Youngstown is still in the fight to better the city's image and the city's reputation, no matter who is in office. Now, the goal has always been to attract more residents and businesses to try to make the area a better place to live, folks. That's getting the story into the top 8. That's why story number 1 made it. Story number 2. 2 water projects set in Youngstown. David Skolnick has a report published June 16th after City Council this past week planned to authorize the Board of Control to make 2 agreements with state agencies to borrow up to $18 million for a pair of water improvement projects. Now, the ordinances, which the report says have been sponsored by Mayor Jamel Tito Brown, are to enter into a joint loan agreement with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency and the Ohio Water Development Authority. Now, what got this story in is the ongoing effort by the city to replace old water lines which contain lead. Now, the article quotes Water Commissioner Harry L. Johnson III, who explained that the funding is set to expire next year and they want to take advantage of the opportunity of the 50% loan forgiveness to help them meet the goal of eliminating all lead lines by 2037. Now, the report is filled with project spending taking place in Youngstown and even focuses on other contracts being negotiated. That's why story number 2 made it. Story number 3. What took place in Vienna? Brandon Cantwell has a report published June 17th after former physical officer Linda McCullough, who served as Vienna's physical officer from 2019 to early 2024, pleaded guilty to all 10 charges, which include 2 counts of theft in office. Now, 1 count of telecommunications fraud and several counts of tampering with records were also mentioned in the report. Now, the report says that McCullough used her elected position to pay personal credit card bills as well as personal and private business expenses at several stores. Now, the value of the property or service stolen was about $116,370. Now, the report is filled with mismanagement details and really goes in detail about what has been taking place in Vienna, folks. This story is still developing. That's why story number 3 made it. Story number 4. Boardman strikes an ambulance deal. Dan Pompley has a report published June 17th, and what the article explains is an approved new contract for ambulance services in the township. The contract was made with Lane Life Trans. Now, this story made it in because in November, township voters rejected a $4.5 million 5-year levy that would have generated $6.1 million to provide ambulance service in the township. Folks, this story is still developing because residents continue to complain about being taxed, some being taxed out of their homes. That's why story number 4 made it. Story number 5, $2.18 million budget bill for the Valley. David Skolnick has a report published June 13th after Ohio Senate's budget bill targets $2.18 million for the Valley. The headline goes on to explain how the funding would be channeled to YSU, Boardman, Poland, and COG. Folks, this is a $60.23 billion biannual state budget bill. Now, State Senator Al Catrona, a Republican from Canfield, was able to get the funding for the 4 projects into the Senate version of the bill as stated in the report. Now, Boardman would get $500,000 for flood mitigation. The entire report is filled with funding information and goals. The bill is headed to Governor Mike DeWine's desk. That's why story number 5 made it this week. Story number 6, audit action in Youngstown. David Skolnick has a report published June 18th explaining how City Council is considering legislation to spend $120,000 on a performance audit of its police and fire department. The report says that they want to make it more efficient and effective. That's in the report. Now, this is after 15 city police officers made more than $50,000 in overtime in 2024. Folks, this story is still developing. That's why story number 6 also made it to the top 2 this week. Big headline. Story number 7 in the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that I made this week for you to keep you informed. Folks, if you do not get up this early and you want to check out the show on Mondays, just to stay. I mean, this is not difficult. This is simplified news. And if you just want to stay informed with the top 8, that means I navigate every story just to keep you informed. You can go to the website on the screen on Mondays and check out. It's on I upload them to our YouTube page. If you just want to see what's happening, you may not know, you may want to check out more stories. This may be the key stone to get you to link up to what is actually happening. Story number 7, property valuation reform bill passed in Ohio. David Skolnick has a report published June 13th after the Ohio House has approved legislation sponsored by State Rep. David Thomas to reform how the process of valuing property is completed. Now, the article goes on to explain how the Flip the Script Act will put county auditors in charge of the sales used to determine valuation changes. Now, this would put control over valuations solely in the hands of county auditors. Now, the bill also allows the Department of Taxation to file an appeal to the Board of Tax Appeals challenging the property sales included or excluded in a sample, requiring the board to issue an appeal by the end of the tax year as stated in the report. Now, this is extensive reporting, so you definitely have to know what's going on to understand it. Now, the current push to see action when it comes to property taxes is what has this story trending. That means that property owners are desperately in need of relief, especially when it comes to property taxes. That's why story number 7 also made it to the top this week. Big. Story number 8 and the top local headline and developing news story that I made this week for you folks. I cannot be perfect. Sometimes I do make mistakes on this show, but this show is to keep you informed. If you do want to support this independent function, that means the independent work that's done here, all you have to do is either visit the website on the screen, or buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, order a sponsor program, or you can stop at the store at 5648 Market Street in Boardman, Ohio, and see my smiling face in the store, selling and doing what I can for the greater good of this community. Story number 8, Insight is putting up a fight to do business. Raymond L. Smith has a headline published June 12th explaining how lawyers representing Insight hospitals are seeking to have a roundtable meeting with Trumbull County commissioners and Warren City leaders to trying to gauge support for them to reopen Trumbull Regional Medical Center and Hillside Hospitals. This is according to Commissioner Chairman Rick Hernandez. Now, according to sources in the area, the hospitals look abandoned. That means that they look like they have no activity, but Insight is keeping the spark alive to try to make something happen to at least get these places back open before they turn into deserted buildings where grass is growing everywhere and windows are broken out. That's serious. Now, this brief headline is keeping Insight and the local hospital fight in top headlines. The fact that the area has seen a number of hospital closures is what got this story into the top. That's why story number 8 made it this week. Well, folks, those are our top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I'll be right back with top 8 international headlines and developing news stories. So don't you go anywhere. The Mediator, me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
Tune in and don't forget to subscribe to Method 8 Inc. YouTube channel. You can also watch free public entertainment. And don't forget to show us some support by visiting www.method8inc.com by buying something, clicking something, watching something, or just reading something. You can also sponsor a program as well. That's www.method8inc.com. Buy stuff, watch stuff, or read stuff.
Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines developing news stories that made this week. Folks, this week we're talking about critical decisions. And, we're all faced with critical decisions in our lifetime. And sometimes we're demonized for the way we are, our manhood or some women. But there's some critical decisions that are being made overseas, especially when Netanyahu had to make the critical decision to go to war with Hamas. And we see some critical decisions happening, even in Washington with the Trump administration and stance on immigration, stance on the border issues. And now we face another critical decision where it almost seems like we're almost trying to be drawn into another conflict in the Middle East. Now, folks, let me remind you that the Middle East has been going at it for a long time. This is probably since the biblical days, before the Bible was even written into its entirety, the story was told. So the thing is the whole purpose of this topic is to try to get you to understand critical decisions. And not everybody makes the right decision. Some of these decisions have to be calculated. Some of these decisions have to be meditated on, because you have to look at what's all at stake. You have a country that is built off freedom and a constitution, and then you have other countries that are built differently. Some are built on religious laws, and you have to make the decision whether you want to engage and involve your people and your own country in a fight a war in another country on foreign soil. And it costs money and it costs lives. And on top of that, you could break the bank. Folks, this is what critical decision is. And the reason why I bring up this topic, because I was born in the 80s. And when I was born, I was always around hippies and people who were quoting peace and wearing, joining hands and singing Martin Luther King anthems, and when you're a child, you're wondering why this is happening. You're like, what happened before I got here? So, you're thinking about, why are all these people wearing headbands and all these tie-dye sweaters with shirts with peace symbols on it, and people talking about peace and love? And then you see Bob Marley, one love, let's get together and feel alright. And you see Michael Jackson spinning around, I'm searching for the man in the mirror. Folks, these people they saw what war did to people. And it resulted in my upbringing to see how my life was. I was born and raised in the heart, the ghettos of Ohio. So I created this show, The Mediator. And this is how I became what I have become, because you see John F. Kennedy and putting up the peace sign after he's been through hell. You see all these presidents, all of a sudden Reagan just said, peace, please, peace. I think these people see a part of life that just changes their perception on what they actually thought and what they actually believe, and they submit it to this one thing, and that's to please choose peace, because war, folks, is hell. And you can conjure it up as much as you want, but when it comes and all hell breaks loose and you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't talk to people, you start to realize how precious peace is, folks. Whew, let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1, kidney disease is on the radar. Scientific America has an interesting piece with a headline warning the public about the mysterious epidemic of kidney disease and how it is killing thousands of young men. The report cites repeated damage from prolonged extreme heat as a factor. Now, although the report's main focus seems to be based in Africa, the stats in the United States are not are to be researched as well. That's because they're not in the report, but the stats of the United States, I had a chance to take a look at. Now, if you did not know, an estimated 37 million adults in the United States, or more than 1 in 7, are living with chronic kidney disease. Now, that's 555,000 people are on 555 people are on dialysis. 200,000 people are living with a kidney transplant, folks, thus getting this story into the top 8, and thus getting kidney disease back on the radar. That's why story number 1 made it. Story number 2, measles remains in top headlines. USA Today has a headline explaining how 3% of measles cases are among those fully vaccinated. Now, this is according to the CDC. Now, the article begins by explaining how in 2025 alone, measles infections have reached 1,235 states. Now, we got the story in is because the article says that 2025 is set to be the largest outbreak in 25 years. Now, the fact that vaccine news has stayed in top headlines is what got the story in. Now, the report goes on to explain how measles vaccines are 97% effective at preventing measles after 2 doses and 93% after 1 dose. That's what's in the report. Now, measles was thought to be eradicated in the U.S. in 2000, but is now feared to be back. That's why story number 2 made it. Story number 3, the graduation issue. Fortune has a report explaining how new graduates are struggling to find jobs. Now, the report goes on to explain how they're locked out of the labor market. Now, what got this story in is the fact that the current labor market appears to be strong and unemployment is still low at 4.2%, with wage growth steady. Now, this report was published June 12th by Britt Morse and goes on to say that the U.S. added 139,000 jobs in May. Now, the article mentions tariffs and uncertainty as a factor, as many companies have pulled back on hiring until they get further clarity on what kind of economy will take shape in 2025. That's why story number 3 made it. Story number 4, retail sales remain on the radar. CNBC has a report explaining how retail sales fell 0.9% in May, which was worse than expected. Now, the article states that this is due to consumer pushback. Retail sales has stayed steady in top headlines. Folks, this story made it in because retailers remain in top headlines. That's why story number 4 made it this week. Well, folks, are our top 4 international headlines developing news stories that made this week. I'll be right back with top 4. So don't you go anywhere. The media to meet Bro West. Top right back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that made this week. Folks, this week we're talking about critical decisions. And every week we have to make critical decisions. I make a critical decision to come in here and do this show. Folks, I could be sitting, anybody could just sit at, and we live in a representative democracy where you could choose to do anything. You could choose sports, you could choose politics, you can choose anything. Every day we make critical decisions, folks. When I made the critical decision to get married, we attended all these peaceful church services, and we found out that the world was different. My faith growing up was considered Christianity, and in these Bible studies, VBS classes, we would go from community to community and find out that there were Christians who had sacrificed their life for their beliefs, dying for other people, standing in front of bullets. We found out missionaries were killed trying to save other kids because of their beliefs. And every day we have to make critical decisions. Critical decisions. So you have to ask yourself, what would you decide if you had all these people around you battling it out? Folks, I'm telling you, I now see why or what was going on in the 70s and 60s before I even got here. I'm not going to lie. I sat down this week and I pondered. I said, man, what would I do? What I've always done my entire life when faced with some serious critical decisions. I do know that fights cause more problems, but I do know that peace seems to settle the dust sometimes, and sometimes there's a time to fight, but critical decisions are serious. But I now understand why all those people, all what they called hippies, were wearing all those tie-dyed shirts, running around with the peace sign, and Noah's Ark was built by Jesus. I now know why some people snapped, like Fred Hampton, get up and get speeches about a revolution. I now see how these movements develop. Because, folks, there are some serious things taking place. And as a human being, we have to decide. I decide to sacrifice my time to try to keep you informed, folks. And some people sacrifice their time to be indoctrinated by radicalism and hatred. And some people sacrifice their time to try to get others to be enlightened. Some people entertain. Folks, every day we have to make critical decisions. Some of us use drugs, some of us don't. But these critical decisions lead us on a pathway to a future, folks. And I hope I'm doing the right thing. Because all my life, I've been raised around hippies and people who are always talking about peaceful ways out. My mother stood in front of a bullet tried to save her sister and brother. One time she stood in front of a gun. So I guess I was taught by the best when it comes to peace. But a lot of them did fight. I did have relatives who fought. I had to fight when I was a kid sometimes. But I think peace is better. I now know why people submit to it, folks, because war is crazy. Let's waste no time, folks. Peace is the way. Let's get to it. Story number 5, jobless claims fall. Reuters has a report by Lucia McKenney. Now, she is explaining how U.S. weekly jobless claims and housing data point to softening economic activity. Now, the report explains how weekly jobless claims have fallen 5,000 to 245,000 claims. Now, the report is filled with data and also states that single-family building permits have dropped 2.7% in May. Now, layoffs continue to play a factor as stated in the report. Now, we got the story in is the one key stat explaining how non-farm payrolls increased by 139,000 jobs in May. Now, compared to 190,000 gain, 190,000 gain a year ago, folks. The story is still developing. That's why story number 5 made it. Story number 6, U.S. Steel remains in top headlines. CBS News has a report explaining how U.S. Steel and Nippon have finalized their partnership. Now, this story has stayed in top headlines. The company will retain its name and headquarters in Pittsburgh, and although Nippon is a Japanese company, the steel will continue to be mined, melted, and made in the United States. And we got the story in is because the partnership is expected to create more than 100,000 jobs throughout the U.S. and will feature unprecedented massive investments in steel making in the United States. President Trump cleared the sale. If you did not know, now the article does mention opposition by quoting the U.S. Steel Workers Union, who issued a statement accusing the companies of downplaying concerns about what the deal would mean over the long term. Now, the article goes on to say that as the sale concludes, it seems likely that the attention will dissipate. Now, the deal closed at $14.1 billion, thus getting the story into the top 8. That's why story number 6 also made it to the top 2 this week. Big story number 7 and the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made this week. Folks, if you don't get up this early, you want to check out the show, I do upload to the website on Mondays on the website. If you don't get up this early, you want to stay up to date on what's actually going on, you can check out the show on the website. Story number 7, political violence and violence against journalists is in top headlines. The Guardian has a report in what appears to be the death of Turki Al-Jazeera. Now, this seems to be the first high-profile killing of a journalist since the 2008 murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Now, this is in Saudi Arabia. Now, the death according to the headline, seems to be due to his speaking out against the Saudi government. Now, the United States is also under the radar now due to political violence. Now, Notice has a report explaining how lawmakers are grappling with a rise in political violence. Now, the report's main focus seems to be on radicalization. Now, this is after a shooting in Minnesota rattled Capitol Hill. A politician, I believe, and her husband were killed. Now, the report says that the lawmakers, these were two lawmakers, now lawmakers are scrambling to disrupt what they see as a long and escalating pattern of political violence. Now, the fear is that they will not be able to stop it. That's the fear, folks. The story made it in because when conflict arises, politicians and journalists are often targeted first. That's why story number 7 always made it to the top this week. Big head. Story number 8 and the top international headline and developing news story that I made this week for you to keep you informed, folks. If you do want to show this independent production some support, it does not take much. All you do is visit the website on the screen and buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Or you can stop at the store at 5648 Market Street in Boardman, Ohio, and see my smiling face in the store. Buy something in the store. Story number 8: another war in the Middle East to be concerned about, folks. The Middle East remains in top headlines, but this time it involves some serious attacks. The Washington Post has a report leaving the United States in the same position as it has always been in, and that is, do we as a country want to enter or engage into another war that has been waged on foreign soil, folks? This is as Iran's supreme leader has refused to surrender, and as Iran and Israel fight it out, folks. The question now is, what choice will the United States make when it comes to our own interests and the conflict, especially when it comes to nuclear weapons? Now, if you did not know, innocent lives are in danger, according to, there was a caller on a talk radio show that I did catch. He says that Iranian internet is down and the people can't even get access to their money to evacuate if they have to, folks. The fact that this war could escalate into something bigger is what got the story to the top, folks. And that's why the story is still developing. That's why I made it to the top this week. Well, folks, are top 8 local and international headlines developing news stories that I made this week. I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of the research. As usual, I thank all the news outlets and journalists, people on the front lines. You deserve all the credit. I'm just a man in the middle navigating your story just to keep people informed, folks. If you do want to show some support, all you have to do is visit the website on the screen, buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or to sponsor a program. Or you can stop at the store at 5648 Market Street in Boardman, Ohio, and see my smiling face. Well, folks, I am out of here. I'll be back next week. Looked over 200 or more stories just to keep you informed. Thank you for tuning in to the Mediator this week with me, Brian West. Peace.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.